There are places in this world that just seem to fall off the map, not because they're remote, but because something has laid claim to them, something ancient and something hostile. We put up fences, post warnings, and cook up official stories to explain them away. Wildfires, geological instability, contaminated soil. But sometimes, the truth is far more terrifying than any lie the government could invent. The story I'm about to tell you is one of those truths. It's a story pieced together from heavily redacted documents, a single survivor's testimony, and a few seconds of garbled audio from a mission that, officially, never happened. This is the story of Whisperwood National Park, and why an elite military kill team was sent into a place where sound itself had gone to die. In the late summer of 2003, 4 college students on a camping trip vanished from Whisperwood National Park. A tragic story, sure, but sadly, not that uncommon. The real story, the one that triggered a clandestine military operation, began when the first search party went in after them. All 113 of them. We're talking experienced hikers, local police, and trained volunteers. Every single one of them disappeared, just like the students they were trying to find. The official explanation was a sudden, catastrophic wildfire, a cover story so flimsy it was almost insulting. But the truth is far, far worse. The government didn't send in firefighters. They sent in a specialized unit, a kill team, to hunt whatever was in that forest. They were prepared for anything. Or so they thought. They weren't prepared for the fact that they were the ones being hunted. Before it became a name spoken in hushed tones, Whisperwood National Park was a postcard. It was the American wilderness, spanning nearly 500,000 acres of dense, old-growth forest. It was a haven for anyone looking to escape the noise of the modern world. Its trails were legendary. Families had been visiting for generations. It was a place of peace. Right up until it wasn't. Our story kicks off with 4 friends from a nearby state university. Liam, Maya, Chloe, and Ben. These weren't thrill seekers. They were experienced campers just looking for one last adventure before the fall semester. On August 22, 2003, they packed their SUV, drove to Whisperwood's northern entrance, and signed the register at the ranger station. They listed their route, a 3-day loop called the Sunken Creek Path, and cheerfully told the ranger they'd be back by Sunday afternoon. They were never seen again. When they didn't check out on Sunday, the head ranger wasn't overly worried. Weather can hold people up. Maybe they just decided to stay an extra day. But by Monday evening, with their parents getting frantic, he started the standard search protocol. A couple of rangers drove up the service road to the Sunken Creek trailhead. Liam's SUV was right there in the parking lot, covered in a thin layer of dew. The rangers hiked the first couple of miles to the campsite where the students planned to spend their first night. What they found there was deeply unsettling. It wasn't a scene of violence or a disaster. It was a scene of interruption. Their big 4-person tent was set up perfectly. Inside, sleeping bags were unrolled. But outside was where the strangeness really started. A camping stove was set up with a pot of water on it, the water just shy of boiling. 4 plates were laid out on a blanket next to packages of instant noodles and dried fruit, like they were literally in the middle of making dinner. Ben's guitar was leaning against a log, a book of chords open right next to it. There were no signs of a struggle. Nothing was overturned, no fabric was torn, no blood. There were also no signs of an animal attack. The food was untouched, which immediately ruled out a bear. A bear would have ransacked the place. Their wallets, their keys, and even their shoes were all lined up neatly just inside the tent flap. The four of them had, for all intents and purposes, just ceased to exist. Mid-motion. The rangers radioed in their bizarre findings, and a much larger search was mobilized. They combed the area, figuring the students had maybe gone for a short, ill-advised night hike and got turned around. But as hours turned into days, the search only turned up more confusion. They found no tracks leading away from the campsite. Not one. The ground was soft and damp. It should have been a perfect canvas for footprints. It was unnervingly blank. Then, the discoveries got even weirder. On day 3, a tracker found one of Chloe's hiking boots. Not on the trail. It was lodged in the crook of a tree branch almost 40 feet in the air, a good 2 miles north of their camp. It was in perfect condition. Later that same day, another team, miles in the complete opposite direction, found Ben's wallet tucked deep inside a hollow log, cash and cards all still inside. Over the next week, items just trickled in, each one more baffling than the last. Liam's sock, neatly folded, was found at the bottom of a shallow creek. Maya's favorite paperback was discovered on a rocky outcrop so treacherous it required climbing gear to get to, with a single page dog-eared. It felt less like a search and more like a scavenger hunt designed by something malevolent. After 10 days, with 0 leads and a palpable sense of dread hanging over the whole effort, the official operation began to wind down. With the official search turning up nothing, the families, desperate and angry, organized a massive civilian volunteer effort. It really was a testament to the community spirit. On September 5th, 2003, a crowd of 113 people gathered at the park's entrance. Seasoned mountaineers, retired cops, local hunters, and just concerned folks who wanted to help. They were organized, equipped, and determined. They set up a base camp just outside the park, a small tent city buzzing with grim purpose, and broke off into teams, each with a grid to search and constant radio contact. They were sure that with this many people, they'd find something. Anything. For the first 12 hours, everything went according to plan. Radio check-ins were like clockwork. Teams reported their progress, describing the tough, dense terrain. But then, a strange new detail started creeping into the reports. Multiple teams, in totally different parts of the park, all started mentioning the silence. At first, it was just an odd thing to note. A searcher would radio back and say something like, "It's real quiet out here. Haven't heard a bird all morning." But as the day went on, the comments became more frequent and more nervous. Around 3 p.m., one team leader, a former police officer, radioed in. You could hear the tension in his voice. "Base, this is Team Alpha. We've stopped for a rest, but something's wrong. There's no sound. I mean no sound. No birds, no bugs, not even wind in the trees. It's like being in a soundproof room. The guys are getting spooked." That was the last complete message from Team Alpha. An hour later, Base Camp tried their scheduled check-in. Only static. Then, one by one, the other teams started falling silent. Team Charlie, then Foxtrot, then Bravo. The radio operator at Base Camp frantically cycled through channels, his calls hitting a growing wall of static. Panic started to spread. By nightfall, they'd lost contact with every single team inside the park. All 113 of them. What happened next? We only know because of one man, Arthur Finch, a 58-year-old retired forester from Team Delta. He stumbled out of the woods at dawn the next day, collapsing at the edge of base camp. His clothes were torn, his face was scratched raw, but his eyes terrified everyone. They were wide with a kind of vacant, bottomless horror. He was babbling, incoherent, talking about the silence and a slurping sound. He was rushed to the hospital for severe dehydration and psychological shock. It took doctors 3 days to get a clear statement from him. The police recorded it from his hospital bed. And that recording, while never released, became a key part of the classified file that would later be known as Operation Chimera. Arthur's story was horrifying. He said that about an hour after his team entered the forest, the world just went quiet. The change was so sudden it made them dizzy. 1 minute, the woods were alive. The next, utter oppressive silence. He said you could feel it pressing on your eardrums. They tried to explain it away. Weird weather, a temperature inversion, but the feeling of wrongness was overwhelming. They pushed on, totally unnerved. That's when they started to feel like they were being watched. That primal, prickling sensation on the back of your neck. They'd spin around, but there was nothing there. Just an empty, silent forest. But the feeling never left. It was constant, and it was coming from all sides. Then, one of his team members, a young woman named Sarah, just vanished. She was walking at the back of the line. Arthur said he turned to say something to her, and she was just gone. No scream, no cry for help. She was just not there. No tracks, no struggle. It was as if she'd been plucked out of reality. Panic set in. The team leader tried the radio. Dead. They decided to abandon the search and get the hell out. That's when they heard the sound. Arthur struggled to describe it. He called it a wet slurping, like someone dragging a bucket of thick mud through leaves. But it was rhythmic, and it was fast. It seemed to pace them, always just out of sight, circling through the dead, silent trees. The sound drove them mad. It was the only thing they could hear, and it was the sound of a predator. One by one, the rest of his team was taken. A man would scream. A brief, choked-off sound that was instantly swallowed by the silence. And when they turned, he'd be gone. The slurping would get louder, closer, then fade again. Arthur just ran. Blindly, tears streaming down his face, that horrifying sound echoing in his head. The last thing he remembered before bursting out of the tree line was glancing back. And at the edge of the dark woods, just for a second, he saw it. A figure. Tall, unnaturally thin, a silhouette of pure black that seemed to drink the light around it. It watched him for a moment, then simply dissolved back into the shadows. He had been allowed to escape. He was a message. The disappearance of 113 people on top of the first 4, plus the deranged testimony of the sole survivor. This was a problem way bigger than local cops could handle. A problem this strange, this impossible, goes up the chain of command, and it goes up fast. Within 48 hours of Arthur Finch's debriefing, the feds took over. A media blackout was slammed into place. The official story was quickly cooked up. A rare underground methane seep had ignited, causing a freak wildfire that incinerated the park and everyone in it. The area was declared a permanent environmental exclusion zone. It was a clumsy cover story, almost insulting, but it was enough to keep the public out. The real response was far more discreet and far more serious. The mission was codenamed Operation Chimera. The file landed on a desk in a department of the DoD that officially doesn't exist. It's the unit that deals with threats that don't fit into any conventional category. They assembled a team. Not just any team. This was a Tier 1 Special Mission Unit, the kind of operators whose service records are blank slates. Let's call them Spectre Team. Spectre Team was 8 members. The leader, callsign Orion, was a veteran of a dozen undeclared conflicts, a man known for being unnaturally calm under pressure. His number 2, Reaper, was a quiet, lethal tracker. Echo was the tech guru, able to operate the most advanced surveillance gear imaginable. Doc was their medic, a combat surgeon who'd seen it all. Then you had Juggernaut and Banshee, the heavy weapons guys. And finally, there were 2 unique additions to the roster. Castle, a combat engineer specializing in demolitions and containment. And the most unusual member, Hex. Hex wasn't a soldier. His file listed him as a consultant. His background was in anthropology, history, and comparative mythology. He was, for all intents and purposes, the unit's paranormal expert. He was there to provide context for the unexplainable. The very fact that he was on the roster, armed just like the others, tells you everything you need to know about what the brass truly believed they were sending their people into. Their briefing was in a secure, windowless room. They saw the satellite images, the fake news reports, and the complete, unedited file, including the video of Arthur Finch's testimony. These operators, men and women who had seen the absolute worst of humanity, sat in stony silence watching that broken old man describe the oppressive silence and the wet, slurping sound that hunted his team in the dark. Orion laid out the mission. Primary objective: get into Whisperwood and find out what happened to the 117 missing people. Secondary objective: identify the threat. Tertiary objective, and the one that gave this operation its name: neutralize that threat by any means necessary. Their gear was a mix of standard and highly experimental. State-of-the-art encrypted comms, advanced night vision and thermals, and a whole lot of suppressed weapons. But they also carried things you would never find in a standard loadout. Echo had a suite of esoteric sensors, EMF detectors, broad-spectrum audio recorders for infrasound and ultrasound. Juggernaut and Banshee, in addition to their machine guns, each carried a man-portable flamethrower. The logic was brutally simple. If bullets don't work, burn it. They were going on a monster hunt. The plan was straightforward. A black helicopter would drop them at the park's edge after dark. They'd move on foot to the volunteer search party's base camp, then push inward toward the original student campsite, which they believed was Ground Zero. As they boarded the chopper, the mood was tense but professional. They were the best of the best. They were hunters, going into a forest to find a predator. They had no idea they were walking straight into a trap. The insertion was clean. The helicopter skimmed the treetops and dropped Spectre Team in a clearing 2 miles from the Whisperwood border. The second their boots hit the ground, they fanned out, forming a perimeter. The world around them was normal. Crickets chirped. A cool breeze moved through the pines. They were good to go. Orion gave the signal, and the team moved out, a tight formation of shadows melting into the trees. They moved with silent efficiency for nearly an hour, crossing the invisible line that marked the park's boundary. And then, it happened. It wasn't a sound. It was the total absence of it. One moment, Reaper, on point, held up a fist and the team froze. The next, the world went dead. The crickets stopped. The wind died. An owl's hoot was cut off mid-call, like someone flipped a switch on the entire forest. Echo was the first to speak, his voice a strained whisper over the comms. "Orion, you getting this? All ambient audio just dropped to 0. My sensors are flatlining. This isn't natural." Orion swept his rifle, his night vision goggles painting the world in an eerie green. The forest was unnaturally still. Not a single leaf stirred. "Confirmed, Echo. All teams, sound off." One by one, they checked in, their voices the only sound in a universe of silence. The effect was profoundly disturbing. These soldiers were trained for the chaos of battle, for sensory overload. They were not trained for total sensory deprivation. It felt like walking on the bottom of a dead ocean. Every snap of a twig under their boots was shockingly loud, an unwelcome intrusion. Hex's voice came over the comms, low and grim. "This is a classic signifier. In folklore, they call it a profane silence. It's a precursor. A sign that you've entered a space that operates under a different set of rules." "Save the folklore, Hex." Orion clipped back, though his voice lacked its usual bite. "Stay sharp. We're proceeding to the base camp." They found the camp an hour later. It was a ghost town. Dozens of empty tents stood with their flaps swaying in a breeze that didn't exist. A fire pit was filled with cold, half-burnt logs. A generator sat silent, its fuel tank still half full. Just like the students' campsite, it was a scene of mass interruption. Radios were left on. Half-eaten meals sat on tables. A map of the park was laid out with a pen resting in the middle of a circle. Doc knelt by a coffee mug on one of the tables. "It's still warm," he murmured. "Whatever happened here, it happened fast and very recently." Orion ordered Echo to deploy his gear. The tech specialist set up motion sensors and began sweeping the area. "Getting some weird readings, boss," Echo reported, his voice tight. "Fluctuating EM fields all over, no source, and the thermals are spotty. I've got cold spots, pockets of air 10, 15 degrees colder than everything around them. And they're moving." As Echo worked, Reaper and Banshee did a wider sweep. It was Banshee who found the first piece of truly impossible evidence. "Orion, you need to see this," she said, her voice strained. Orion and Hex moved to her position. She was pointing her light up into a massive pine tree. There, 60 feet up, carefully and neatly stacked on a thick branch, was a pile of clothing. Jeans, shirts, jackets. They were folded, as if for laundry day. "That's from the Finch report," Hex said, his voice barely a whisper. "He wasn't crazy. It's a territorial marking or a trophy." Suddenly, Echo's voice crackled in their ears, full of alarm. "Contact! Sensor trip on the western perimeter, something moving fast." The team snapped to high alert, weapons trained on the dark tree line. "Thermal?" Orion demanded. Negative thermal, Orion. I repeat, negative thermal. The sensor was tripped, but there's nothing there. Wait, I'm getting audio. Something on the infrasound spectrum. He patched it through. It was a low, stomach-churning thrum, more of a vibration than a sound. And woven within it, right at the edge of hearing, was something else. A faint, wet, dragging noise. A slurping. The sound sent a jolt of pure ice through every single member of the team. It was real. Arthur Finch hadn't been hallucinating. "Where is it, Echo?" Reaper whispered, his rifle tight to his shoulder. "I can't pinpoint it. It's everywhere. The sound is coming from all directions at once." Echo stammered, his professionalism finally cracking. And then Juggernaut, covering their rear flank, screamed. It wasn't a long scream. It was a sharp, terrified, guttural cry that was violently cut short. "Juggernaut, report!" Orion yelled, spinning around. But there was nothing there. The heavy weapons specialist, a man who weighed 250 and carried a machine gun, was gone. His weapon lay on the forest floor. The grass around it was untouched. No drag marks. He was just gone. Erased. And the only thing left behind was a sudden, deafening silence where his scream should have been. Losing Juggernaut shattered the team's composure. Seeing a man that capable vanish into thin air without a sound was a violation of every law of physics they knew. Panic, cold and sharp, was setting in. Orion's voice, hard as steel, cut through it. "Defensive circle, now. Reaper, on me. Echo, 360-degree sweep. Nobody fires without a target." They snapped into formation, back to back, a tiny island of armed humanity in a silent, predatory ocean. The forest was no longer their objective. It was their prison. They weren't the hunters anymore. They were the bait. "Orion, the slurping is getting louder," Doc reported, his voice trembling. He was right. The wet, dragging sound was more distinct now, circling them just beyond the reach of their lights. It still had no single point of origin. The sound seemed to ooze from the very air around them. "Still nothing on thermals," Echo said, his fingers flying across his portable console. "No heat signatures, but the cold spots. They're multiplying. They're converging on us." "What are we dealing with, Hex?" Orion demanded, his eyes locked on the impenetrable wall of trees. Hex had his eyes closed. "It's a mimic, a predator that uses sensory deprivation to isolate its prey. The silence is its hunting ground. It removes all other stimuli so you can only focus on one thing. The sound of it coming for you. It feeds on fear before it feeds on flesh." "That's great," Reaper bit out. "Any tips on how to kill a ghost?" Before Hex could answer, one of Echo's motion sensors shrieked, a position only 20 meters away. At the same time, Banshee yelled, "Contact, 9 o'clock." Every weapon swung in that direction. Nothing. Just dark, silent trees. There was something there, she insisted. A man, tall and skinny, just standing in the shadows. "Negative," Echo countered. "Nothing on any sensor." "I saw him," she growled. Then a sensor on the opposite side of their circle screamed. "Contact, 3 o'clock," Reaper yelled. They swung around again. Nothing. It was toying with them, trying to make them panic, to break formation. "Hold your positions," Orion commanded. "It's a feint. Don't—" He was cut off by a new sound, directly over their comms. Static, then a voice. Juggernaut's voice. "Guys, I'm okay. I got turned around. I can see your lights. I'm coming back." For a heart-stopping second, relief washed over them. "Juggernaut, what's your position?" Orion asked. "Right here," the voice whispered. And this time it wasn't on the radio. It was in all of their ears at once, a chilling whisper that was both everywhere and nowhere. At that exact moment, the slurping sound intensified tenfold, coming from directly above them. Reaper was the first to look up. His face, lit by the green glow of his NVGs, went slack with pure, unfiltered terror. He didn't even have time to scream. Something dark and fluid, like living oil, dropped from the canopy. It wasn't solid. It was a cascade of glistening black tendrils that moved with impossible speed and wrapped around Reaper completely. For a fraction of a second, his muffled struggles were audible, and then, just like Juggernaut, there was a final, wet, gulping sound. And he was gone. The thing retracted back into the darkness, leaving only a few black droplets on the ground that sizzled and evaporated like acid. All hell broke loose. Banshee screamed and opened fire, her machine gun sending tracers into the empty canopy. "Light it up!" Castle yelled, and he and Hex unleashed their flamethrowers. Twin jets of liquid fire roared into the night, turning the silent forest into a vision from hell. For a glorious second, the oppressive silence was broken by the roar of the flames. And the fire revealed it. Not clearly, but in glimpses. It wasn't one creature. It was many. Tall, impossibly thin humanoid shapes, blacker than shadow, flitted at the edges of the firelight. They moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, like broken puppets. And the flames weren't burning them. They passed right through them, making them flicker and distort like a bad video signal. The slurping was now a deafening chorus, mixed with a high-pitched chittering that drilled into their skulls. "They're not real!" Echo screamed over the noise. "They're projections, the cold spots. The real thing is somewhere else." He was right. As the flames died down, they saw the true source. In the center of the clearing, where nothing had been a moment before, a shape was pulling the darkness into itself, growing larger. It wasn't humanoid. It was a pulsing, amorphous mass of that same glistening black ooze. And embedded within it, like stones half sunk in mud, were faces. The faces of the 4 college students. The faces of the searchers. And the fresh, terrified face of Juggernaut. Their eyes were open, their mouths locked in silent screams. This was the thing. The eater of silence. The creature, the Silentium Vorax, as Hex had scrawled in his frantic final notes, was the hub. The shadow figures, the voices, the cold spots. They were just lures. The central mass was the spider. As it surged forward, what was left of Spectre Team broke. Their training and discipline evaporated in the face of that impossible horror. Castle and Banshee were engulfed instantly, their flamethrowers sputtering out as the black mass flowed over them. Doc screamed and ran blindly into the woods, only to be cut off by one of the jerky, silent shadow figures. It just stepped in front of him, and he vanished on contact. Echo, crouched over his failing equipment, was the next to go. His final transmission was a single garbled word. Impossible. Only 2 were left. Orion and Hex. They stood back to back, Orion firing his rifle on full auto into the mass with no effect. The bullets just sank into it without a sound. Hex dropped his useless flamethrower and held up a silver flare. This wasn't standard issue. It was something he'd brought himself. With a trembling hand, he ignited it. It didn't just burn. It erupted in a brilliant, piercing white light like a miniature sun. The effect was immediate. The chittering and slurping became a single, unified shriek of pure agony. The central mass recoiled violently from the intense light, its form wavering. The shadow figures at the edge of the clearing flickered and died like old TVS. The light was hurting it. "Run!" Hex screamed, shoving Orion. "It can't stand the light, the silence. It creates a void for it to exist in. You have to fill the void." Orion didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted, not daring to look back, running for his life as Hex stood his ground, a lone figure holding a burning star against an ocean of absolute black. According to the heavily redacted after-action report, 2 members of Spectre team managed to exfiltrate from the Whisperwood exclusion zone. One was the team leader, Orion. The other, surprisingly, was Hex. Orion was found miles from the park, wandering a service road in a catatonic state. Hex somehow made it all the way back to the extraction point, where he collapsed from exhaustion and severe chemical burns on the hand that had held the flare. Their debriefings are almost entirely blacked out. The few legible lines describe a non-corporeal, dimensionally invasive entity that acts as a predatory void. The official conclusion of Operation Chimera was catastrophic failure. The threat was not neutralized. It was only observed. Whisperwood National Park remains sealed off to this day. The official story had been updated to include warnings of unexploded military ordnance from some forgotten training exercise. Just another layer to keep people out. No one goes in. Nothing comes out. The leaked file ends with a single chilling satellite thermal image taken 6 months after the incident. The park is a uniform blue, a patch of unnatural cold on the map. But in the very center, right where the students' campsite once was, there is a single tiny pinprick of black, a spot of absolute zero, from which no heat, no light, and no sound can ever escape. The story goes that the woods have reset themselves, that the silence has returned, and that the entity is patiently waiting. After all, fences decay, warnings fade, and memories are short. And it's a very, very hungry thing to leave waiting in the dark.